All right, thank you, Jackie, and thanks everyone for coming out this evening to the library. My name is Chris Monk. I'm a professor in the Department of Psychology here at the university. Tonight, I'm incredibly pleased to have Dr. Brenda Volling join us to discuss her very important and really exciting and I think very novel research. Dr. Volling is the Lois Hoffman Collegiate Professor in the Department of Psychology here at the University of Michigan. She completed her undergraduate degree in psychology at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She then got her master's and PhD in human development and family studies from Penn State University. After grad school, she became a postdoctoral fellow at the Carolina Consortium on Human Development at the University of North Carolina. Dr. Volling joined the faculty at the Department of Psychology here as an assistant professor, and then she came up through the ranks to where she is now a full professor as well as a collegiate professor. Dr. Volling's research examines social and emotional development, parent-child interactions, and family relationships. She has conducted extensive research on the role of fathers in children's development and continues to work with international collaborators, students, and postdoctoral fellows to advance research specifically on father-child relationships. Beyond her research, she's also had a huge positive impact on the university and beyond through her leadership as the chair of the developmental psychology program here, the director of our NIH developmental psychology training grant, and most importantly, I think, as the director of the Center for Human Growth and Development, all here at the university. She is a fellow of the American Psychological Association, a fellow of the Association for Psychological Science, and she is invited to do a very prestigious research residence at the Jacobs Foundation Marbach Castle, which really sounds awesome to me, a little while back. Dr. Volling's talk is titled, How Do Fathers Matter for Young Children's Development? Let Me Count the Ways. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Volling.
Thank you, Chris, for that lovely introduction, and thank you, everyone, for coming to hear tonight about fathers. I'm assuming that people are very interested in this topic. Let me just get started. I'm using my University of Michigan background and slides, and I also have put up here throughout the talk like this is a T-shirt with the national championships in football. I actually love football. It's not necessarily because it has to do with dads, and I'm very sort of proud of the University of Michigan national championship. So let's get started. For the goals for this talk this evening, I wanted to present some of the scientific research on the role of fathers in early childhood development and how fathering affects young children's developmental outcomes. The second thing I would like to do is highlight some of the activities or interactions from that research on fathers and what parents in general can do with children that facilitates several different areas of children's social, emotional, language, and cognitive development. During the talk, I'm actually going to provide some examples of what fathers can do with their children to encourage developmental growth, given the fact this is a community-based talk, and I thought people might want to walk away with some information and knowledge to take home with them. So I've tried to provide that, but of course, please ask me if you have any other questions. And I also want to remind the audience that I study early social-emotional development. So my talk is going to be focused on those early years of infancy and toddlerhood and preschool and into the early elementary school years. If you're a father of an adolescent, I'm not going to be able to do much. I'm not going to be able to help much because I don't study that age group. But a lot of the issues with respect to building relationships with your children are probably still, well, not probably, they are still relevant. And what happens in these early years is definitely going to predict the relationships and what's going to happen in later years. So I just first wanted to give a little background about me. Chris gave a little bit. But I just wanted to let people know that I have been doing research on fathers for a really long time. My first study was actually my honors thesis that was done at the University of Illinois with my advisor, Dr. Ross Park, where we looked at mothers and fathers of preterm infants and how they compared in their interactions and their parenting skills with mothers and fathers of full-term infants. I then went on to graduate school at Penn State, where I completed my master's thesis in 1985, looking at how different characteristics like personality and an infant temperament and some of the social support systems that men had that would predict their involvement both in the division of childcare labor in the home, but also the quality of their interactions with their young infants. And we did this in both dual learner and single learner families. That work would later be published in the Journal of Marriage and Family. And I then did my dissertation in 1990 looking at the contribution of both mother-child and father-child relationships from infancy through first grade and how it predicted the extent of cooperation and conflict between 6-year-old siblings and their younger brothers and sisters. And that was eventually published in Child Development and was at that time probably the first study of the preschool age children of siblings that was published that actually included fathers. I've been doing research, as I said, for well over 40 years at this point, but still the field of child development in general still focuses mostly on mothers as the parent and the primary caregiver and the essential parent to children's development. And there's a reason for that, because mothers are highly involved with their children, okay? But I'm still publishing. You'll see here I've published with some colleagues a paper that says Fathers Are Parents Too. We're writing this paper simply because 40 years later, after my honors thesis, we still are trying to remind the field of developmental psychology and child development that there are other caregivers in children's lives, multiple caregivers, and that this paper was actually published in 2018. And then I also have a special issue that I did in the Psychology of Men and Masculinities, where we were focusing on encouraging new ways of looking at fathering and expanding the focus on different family relationships, different family forms. I'm not going to be doing presentations of my research necessarily this evening. Maybe I'll put a couple of snippets in here and there. I've decided to focus mostly on the research in general on fathering and then how that is relevant to children's development and can be translated for those who want to take some information home. So some might ask, well, why are you doing an evening on fathers, okay? Why fathers? Don't mothers do these things too? Well, of course they do, okay? Most of the literature on parenting, as I said, has been done on mothers and relationships. So what we also have now been doing with dads has always been done predominantly with moms beforehand. So what I'm going to be talking about tonight is not unique to dads, okay? Any adult caregiver who engages in these types of activities is going to be contributing to children's development. But I focus on fathers because there really is very little research, resources, interventions, and literature and blogs out there for fathers to get information. And when I talk to dads, they are asking me about the type of information I'm giving you tonight because they'll say, I can't find it. So I want to focus on fathers because of this sort of limited availability. Now, I wanted to give you a sense of the state of the literature to bring this point home. So right up in 1997, there was a paper, a very, very influential paper published in the Journal of Child Development. This paper was looking at whether or not sensitive mother-child interactions predicted the quality of a child's attachment to the mom and the security. Was the child developing a secure attachment relationship? Huge meta-analysis that was done. It was criticized by some because it was like, well, where's the fathers? Don't infants basically develop secure attachments and have attachments with their dads? So they came back and they said, okay, we get it. We did this meta-analysis. We found all the studies we could on fathers. Now, let me tell you, there was like nearly 100 studies that they had put in this meta-analysis on moms, okay? So they came back, they published it, and essentially what you have here is a summary of those findings. In this abstract that we did, of some of my colleagues we did in Amsterdam, where we actually did a second meta-analysis that was published in 2011. So let me walk you through what's going on here. This is basically the effect of, does mother's sensitivity in her interactions, or what dads in their interactions, predict the security of the attachment relationship? Yes, it does. It is significant. This is the K equals how many studies they actually were able to find in the literature. 8. Compared to well over, like, close to 100, okay, for moms, which amounted to a total of 546 fathers that they were able to find research on in 1997 and publish. Okay, 2011, Nicole Lacossin comes to here to the University of Michigan, comes to my lab, works with me, and says, I'm really interested in dads and attachment. I said, great. She decides to do a second meta-analysis of 3 decades of research. Okay, right here now are the findings from this meta-analysis that we published. Okay, what you'll see here is that in that 14-year period, okay, we now have 16 studies. So we've added 8 more from the 8 from the prior, which now we have approximately 1,355 dads, okay? So my point is this, I think, demonstrates my point of how we lack the same number of studies on fathers as we do for moms. And again, one of the reasons why I've decided to focus tonight on fathers. So, first, however, I would like to have a little test of wits of the audience here. I'm a developmental psychologist, and I know that there may be some other developmental psychologists or neuroscientists in the room. And we have been interested in the early years of childhood. So when I ask why the early years, because we know that early brain development is critical, and it's a critical period for subsequent development. We know that there's rapid development occurring during this period of time. We know that early experience is significant in laying down those neural tracks and building the brain architecture of this early brain. So, if I show you these 4 different kinds of toys, okay, and you think about the different things that babies and young children would do with these toys, I'll walk through what they're doing and the different gadgets and stuff, I would be interested in what people think would be sort of the optimal toy or the optimal experience activity that would lead to the more optimal, I should say, would have more effects on early development. There's more things that could potentially be contributing to development. So the first is the Brilliant Baby's First Blocks. This is a shape sorter. You've probably seen these. It's a little box. There's different shapes on the top, circles, squares, triangles. The blocks are the shapes of those different types of those shapes. And the child has to figure out where the triangle goes, where the circle goes, and so forth, okay? So then has to manipulate, figure these things out, and get the blocks into the box. The second is the Little Superstar sing-along stage, okay? And as you can see, this allows the baby to look in the mirror, see themselves in their reflection. There's music that plays. They can play the music, push it. They can sing along with it, and they can look at all the nice little colors and gadgets that are on this little sing-along stage. The third one, many of you may yourself have had. As you can see, these are the wooden, Alyssa and Doug ABC 1, 2, 3 wooden blocks. They're the little wooden blocks. You probably, I don't know, I think these could be 100 years old at this particular point. I don't know. But you can see, hopefully, that there's the wooden blocks. There's an A, there's an alphabet on one side, there's numbers on the other side, there's pictures of animals. Children can look at them, they can build with them, and so forth. And the final one is the Rainforest Melodies and Lights Deluxe Gym. And this essentially allows very young babies, very early in life, to sit under there, practice grasping and grabbing, look at all these different colors, and also listen to music and sound. Okay? Anybody want to venture a guess? Yes, sir?
Steve, the blocks.
The blocks, why?
building structures, throwing them.
So there's all different types of activities or things that the child can do with those blocks.
And it's
Anybody?
cheap.
And it's cheap. That's a good one. That's a really important one. Anybody else? Yes. So C as well. So parent-child interaction. Okay. Anybody else? Well, the two of you must have taken my infant development course because the correct answer is C, because babies and young children need the support and scaffolding of a parent in order for them to actually benefit from any of these toys, because playing alone is not going to provide the sort of sophistication or the direction and teaching that they're actually going to need to benefit from those toys. So it was kind of a trick question, but I have very, very smart people in this room, so they both sort of picked the right option, which was definitely C, because of the interactions, which is what both of you essentially had underscored. So, emphasizing here that the first 3 years of life is a critical period for this brain development, yet most parents and people will focus on cognitive development, which is most likely cortical development. So skills such as reading, math, and musical ability will be developing predominantly after the age of 3 and into adolescence and adulthood. But infancy and early childhood is really a time for the development of that limbic system, the affective and emotional systems, and that prefrontal cortex. So what is really critical here, which is what I was trying to emphasize and which was mentioned, is that it really is the quality of early father-infant interactions or parent-infant interactions in general, the security of that infant-father attachment relationship, and social engagement in what we refer to as serve and return interactions. So I'm not going to go into and show you this video because I don't have extensive time tonight to do that. But if you're interested to see what a serve and return interaction is, I highly recommend you go to the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard. These are considered to be very critical early interactions that help shape that brain architecture, lay down those neural tracks. So when an infant or a young child babbles, they gesture or they cry, and an adult responds appropriately, either with eye contact, words, a hug, those neural connections are being built and strengthened in that baby's brain, and they're supporting all sorts of types of communication, language, and social skills. Again, I'm not going to essentially show you. If you want to, I highly recommend it, but think of a ping pong kind of back and forth tennis game where the child does something, it's led by the child, and the parent responds. They watch then the child, and then they respond again. So it's a child-led interaction that's being responded to in an age-appropriate fashion. So we would refer to that interaction of serve and return more as sensitivity and responsiveness to children's cues. So what is it from a research perspective? It is being able to read those affective and cognitive cues and those behavioral cues and signals of children. And then, as I said, responding in a manner that's sensitive and age-appropriate. So when I go through some of the research tonight, I'm going to focus mostly on systematic reviews and meta-analyses because this is trying to summarize a much larger research base that we can feel more confident in concluding that whether or not fathers' behaviors, in this case paternal sensitivity, in these types of interactions I was discussing, do indeed have benefits for children's cognitive and social emotional outcomes. So sensitive parents, according to child developmental research in general, are parents who act within the children's zone of proximal development. Have people heard of the zone of proximal development? Okay, the developmentalists are going, yeah, I've heard of that. Okay, yeah. The zone of proximal development by a man named Vygotsky, it is the difference when you're interacting with a child. It is the difference between what a child can do without assistance. So it's where they're actually at in their developmental level. And it's the difference between that and what they can do, but they need some sort of guidance and encouragement and collaboration with a more capable adult or peer. So it's that potential. They can get there, but they need help and structure, okay? So if you think about, an example would be, a child may be perfectly capable of taking those wooden blocks and picking them up and putting them in, both hands or whatever, but they're not yet able to stack them on top of each other without them potentially falling over. They are going to get there, but they will be able, perhaps with the assistance of an adult, to be able to master that next level above and beyond what they can actually do by themselves, okay? So that's the zone of proximal development, and you want to basically work within that zone of proximal development when you're a parent and you're doing age-appropriate sensitivity. According to attachment theory, have people heard about attachment theory? Attachment parenting, probably at some point, yes. Through these repeated interactions, sensitive fathers and mothers provide a secure base from which their children can explore their environment, and they don't feel threatened or anxious. This builds trust in their fathers and provides this environment of learning where they can go out and explore their environment and touch objects and learn. Parental sensitivity or paternal sensitivity, based on this review article up there, the systematic review and meta-analysis, is related to the following things in research: better language skills, cognitive abilities, executive functions, such as, includes working memory, inhibitory control, how well is a child able to control their inhibitions and regulate themselves, and cognitive flexibility, their emotion regulation. Are they able to control their emotions, calm themselves down, for instance, if they get really upset? And it's also related to fewer externalizing behavior problems. What are externalizing behavior problems? Aggression, conduct problems, acting out types of problems. So paternal sensitivity seems to be related to certain types of children's outcomes. As I said, I'm going to talk about early childhood, and I study infants. Infants are one of the areas. And I'm interested in the transition to fatherhood because this is the first time a dad this is their first time, transition to fatherhood, faced with a baby. So what is important in those early years? There's some research on infant-directed speech. What is it? Well, it's gone by a number of different names. The first was baby talk, okay? Baby talk. It's talking to the baby in this sort of high-pitched, varied, oh, honey, how are you? I'm going to show you a video in just a second. It also then was, after researchers started studying it, they're like, wow, baby talk really has some functions here and some significance. And they started calling it motherese. Maybe you've heard motherese, okay? Well, but then some researchers said, but wait, not only do mothers do this and vary their voices and the way they talk to babies, so do fathers, so do grandmas, so do childcare providers. Oh, older siblings even do it, okay? So they actually went from motherese and they eventually then called it parentese, but then when they started realizing all these people were doing this, they decided to switch to sort of infant-directed speech, okay? So what does infant-directed speech? Here are some of the features when you think about infant-directed speech. It's prosodic. It has a rhythm and an intonation. It's how it kind of flows. It's melodic. It's sort of the sing-song quality. It usually involves higher pitch, so people raise their voices. It is a greater range of frequencies, so I'm just talking like I normally would, but if I were to talk to the baby, I would be all over the place, high and low, and trying to make the baby smile. It's varied, and there's very exaggerated facial expressions and intonation that goes along with this. There's also what we refer to as simplicity features. So it involves much shorter utterances, okay? Things like, what are you doing? What's that? Are you looking at me? Are you smiling? Are you happy? Okay, it's not involving these long conversations. So the other day, your dad and I, we went out to lunch, and we basically were, this is not what baby infant-directed speech is, okay? That's adult-directed speech, okay? It has a slower tempo. It's much slower. What are you doing? Are you happy, okay? Longer pauses in between the different phrases in the sentences. There's a redundancy to it, these redundancy features. So there's repetition. You hear that, they say it over and over and over. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you happy? Are you happy? So there's these redundancy features. Lexical features are the types of words that are being said in infant-directed speech, which is not what is said in adult-directed speech. So things like mama and dada. Okay, most people in here are probably not referring to babas as babas, and going to bed at night in your jammies and taking your binky with you, okay? But these are the types of words that often will pervade infant-directed speech. And the content, of course, is relevant to what's going on in the infant's world in terms of everyday topics about brothers and sisters, moms and dads, the pet dog, that, and so forth, okay? So, I'm going to show an example of what infant-directed speech looks like. Hopefully this will work.
Hi. Can I
So that basically is a beautiful example of what
Hi. Can I
infant-directed
check your belly?
Oops.
Let's
What infant-directed speech looks like. When moms were doing that's a doctor, but that's exactly what early research. This is what they were looking at, and this is a beautiful example of that. Now, infant-directed speech does seem to be universal. It's used in most cultures, and has these similar types of features. Now, what I will say is we do not know as much about fathers in infant-directed speech, okay? But I can tell you, having done research with fathers for a long time, that's not how they do it. Okay, they do raise, they have these they do raise their pitch and whatever. But I don't have the video, I debated whether to show it, but I was watching a video today that I love to show in my class, and the dad, to just give you an idea of what the dad's like, and he's doing infant-directed speech as far as I'm concerned, because he's directing that speech to an infant, okay? It doesn't look like that. Somebody once told me, dads don't do infant-directed speech. I said, well, what do you mean they don't do infant-directed speech? Because it doesn't look like that. It doesn't have that sing-song quality. It's not all exaggerated. Moms do it. And this was a woman who was telling me that dads didn't do infant-directed speech. And I was like, I'm pretty sure if a dad is speaking and it's directly to an infant, it has to qualify as infant-directed speech. But if you're using what we refer to as the maternal template, that everything that we know from research has been based on the template of what we've done in terms of moms, yeah, it doesn't look the same. And you might conclude dads aren't doing it. But this particular father that I was watching today, he was in the a doctor's office. Big man, maybe a football player. He's got this tiny little baby. And the baby, they're in there for one thing. Baby needs the vaccines, okay? And this is that postnatal visit, if you've ever had a baby, where they get like 3 of them. Pa-ping, pa-ping, pa-ping in their thighs, and babies are crying. And dad knows this is what's about to happen, okay? And so he's sitting there, the nurse is there, putting like a polio vaccine in the baby's mouth, and he's just going, yeah, you're doing really good, you're doing really good. Yeah, you know, look at daddy, look at daddy. Yeah, you're doing great, whatever. And the nurse says, well, we have to come over here now and get the we need the vaccines. And he goes, oh, you know, you're going to cry. I'm telling you, you're going to cry. But don't worry about it. Daddy's going to be right there. I'm going to hold your hand. He pulls the baby up there. Baby, nurse gives him the first shot. Bing, starts crying. Oh, man, little dude. Oh, man. Oh, you know, he's just going on and on. And essentially he goes through this whole series, and it doesn't look anything like what we really saw. The baby gets done with the shots. He picks him up. The baby's crying. He's like, oh, come on. It's okay. Daddy's here. Yeah, it's cool now, right? It's cool. I mean, it is infant-directed speech, but it doesn't look the same. But what we do know is that infant-directed speech is intended to soothe babies. It is intended to help with their emotional arousal. It communicates affect. Oh, daddy's here, it's okay. It grabs the infant's attention, which allows them to explore and to acquire knowledge and process information. It helps facilitate potentially language comprehension. Most of this work is done with moms. But for the few studies, and I'm going to emphasize here at the end, more research is needed, because I'm not sure we're actually capturing infant-directed speech when we're looking at dads, but the very few studies that have a group of Irish fathers, for instance, who used that greater pitch variability when they were interacting with their infants, this was later associated with more receptive vocabulary. So essentially what they were understanding when words were spoken. Italian fathers who used this, their indicator was the number of nouns that dads were using in this sort of sing-song fashion while they were playing with their 2-year-old children. This predicted a year later how many words the 3-year-old produced and understood in assessments. So infant-directed speech, a very important part of early father-infant interactions, as it is in mother and parent-infant interactions in general. So what can you do to facilitate your child's development based on infant-directed speech and paternal sensitivity? Talk to your baby, obviously, back and forth. Use that sing-song quality. Make funny, exaggerated faces when you're looking at them, okay? Describe what you're doing. Just walk around while you're dressing and diapering and bathing. Just talk to them. Tell them what's happening. Use your words to soothe and comfort your baby. Sing lullabies, rhymes. Spotify, I found out, has a hip-hop lullabies playlist, that if you want to utilize that, make up your own playlist. Have some music. Utilize this. Creativity, in my mind, is the name of the game here in terms of trying to figure out how and what you're going to say. But the bottom line is, like that video, you want to see that smile on that baby's face. When they look at you, you want to see that baby trying to engage you in whatever means they can with their cooing and their vocal their vocals and their gestures. You're trying here to build a connection. You're trying here to build that attachment relationship between you and your young child, which will serve as the basis for all other development. So I'm going to focus on father-child play. What is it? Dads do a lot of it. Parents do a lot of it, but dads do a whole lot of it. What is it? It's any activity that is deemed pleasurable, voluntary. It's done for its own sake. It's imaginative, it's creative, it involves positive affect and pleasure, and it is done by choice. There are different types of play, so play isn't play isn't play. We make distinctions between different types. We have pretend play, where you act out roles. You do exploratory play, which is just trying to explore different toys and figure out how things are working. Role playing, trying to figure out, taking on different roles of different characters. Rough and tumble play, okay? Toy play, singing. These are all considered forms of play. We know that parents, including fathers, are their children's first playmates. Dads in general are more physical in their play. They're more stimulating. They use more rough and tumble play. They encourage risk-taking and challenge their children during these types of play. But they also engage in all those other types of play and games, just as mothers do. And so people don't walk away thinking that fathers are the only ones who physically stimulate their children. That is not the case. So do mothers. They also engage in physical play. But parents often prefer different types of play. And fathers tend to prefer these certain types of energetic, physical, rough and tumble types of play. So I'm going to focus on this. What is it? Physical play, movement, activities, challenging the child to exert their strength in using one's body. You see it already in infant physical play with playful facial expressions that they're physically trying to place their face in front of the baby's face using goofy, I call them goofy dad faces, tickling, bouncing, chasing a toddler, singing songs, rhymes, bouncing their limbs, and so forth. Now, rough and tumble play is a very specific type of physical play that is vigorous, such as wrestling. Okay, now these aren't babies now. Now we're talking about toddlers and preschoolers. I'm moving up the age here. We start with babies, transition to fatherhood. Now your child's getting to be toddler and preschool. Rough and tumble play is done a lot more in toddlerhood and preschool. It's vigorous activity, very vigorous activity. Wrestling, grappling, rolling around on the floor, play kicking and kickboxing, tumbling, tackling one another. And it may on the surface appear aggressive, okay? But it is done in a playful context, okay? It's deemed pleasurable by both the child and the father, and it is done by choice, okay? Nobody's forcing this child and his parent to engage in physical rough and tumble play. Children love this. I've watched my husband play with my son. We're swan diving, child swan diving off the couch onto the husband who's laying on the floor, he flips him over his head, and it's the greatest thing ever, right? But I've watched a lot of rough and tumble play, both at home with fathers and also in my lab. It is often accompanied, well, it has to be, if it's considered play, playful facial expressions, positive affect, laughing, smiling. In order for this to be maintained in a play state, fathers have to be incredibly sensitive. You have to pay attention to those faces. Pay attention to your children's emotional clues. Sensitivity is critical here. You get a little too rough, and that happens in rough and tumble play. It goes from everybody's having a great time to tears in a very short period of time. But you pay attention to it, you adapt, but in rough and tumble play is playful, it's positive. It is not aggression. Some people often will say, yeah, but you shouldn't be playing your kids like that because it's aggressive, okay? It is not aggressive. Rough and tumble play, as I said, increases in toddler and the preschool years, but then it declines after that once you start hitting elementary school, and I think possibly because it's being replaced with formalized sports activities after the preschool years. The reason it's different than aggression because we know that when parents do this and dads are engaged in this, it is related to children's social competence, okay? It's not related to externalizing and conduct disorders or aggressive types of behavior problems, okay? Rough and tumble play, teachers, when they rate these children as socially competent. What do we mean? They're able to make friends, they're successful in their peer interactions in school, and it's also related to children's emotional skills, their ability to decode and encode facial expressions, which you can imagine if you're in this kind of activity where there's a lot of robust physical activity and emotions, you become very good as a child, being able to read other people's emotions. What can you do? Wrestle. But remember, it's play. It has to be fun. It needs to involve positive affect, and it needs to be voluntary. Have a dance party for the whole family. Put on your favorite tunes. Dance away. Sing while you're at it, too, and you'll encourage language development. And build a fort. Pillows, blankets, tables. What else do you need? Maybe a flashlight, okay? Tell family stories. Read a book while you're also involved. Get a bottle of bubbles. Blow and catch. Make them jump high, then make them jump low. Run around the room. Let them chase you. Hide and seek. And count to 10 at the same time. Teach numbers. You ever heard of Twister? Anybody here done Twister? Yeah, absolutely. Play outside. Go sledding. Jump in puddles after a rain. Engage in movement and physical activity. Adventurous play is another form of play. I just found this article. This is not about dads. It's about moms and dads, but I love this article because we don't really talk about this kind of play, but I think it's really important. I think we're going to see more research. What is adventurous play? It's play where children experience feelings of excitement, but in the context of age-appropriate risk-taking. Okay, anybody want to kind of think of an example of what that might look like?
Rope swings,
What?
rope swing,
Rope swings, absolutely. Playground equipment, jungle gyms. I think of slides. Climbing a tree, right. Swimming, absolutely. Adventurous play benefits these children because it exposes them and sensitizes them to situations that we all at one point naturally felt some anxiety about. And some of the examples here, height, having a fear of height, swimming in water, okay, rock climbing, maybe not a toddler, but yeah, but I get you exactly, I know what you're talking about, yes. Trampoline, something like that, absolutely. Jumping, a little bit frightening or whatever, I'm not sure I really want to do it. This is adventurous play. I've seen so many, dads are masters of this play. They are really masters at it. I mean, they are just sitting there, on the kids on the slide, he's up there, he's 2.5, he's looking down, he's scared, he doesn't want to do it, he's like, I don't want to do it. Dad's like, it's okay, come on, I'm right here, and that's critical. This has to be done in the confines of a safe environment. They have to feel that the relationship they have with that father can be trusting, that they know that they're safe, and that dad's there to encourage them, but he's not going to let them get hurt. So he's like, you can do this. You can do this. Come on. You want me to take your hand? Come on. Let go now. Let go. Boom. Child goes down. Pride, beaming, dad celebrating, okay? So this is adventurous play. Why do people think it's important? Because if a child doesn't have this type of play, they're not able to have these opportunities to overcome these natural fears, okay? And it may lead to an increase in what we refer to as internalizing disorders, which is like anxiety and withdrawal. So the notion is you need to sensitize. Children need to be sensitized to this type of, risk-taking and this sort of exciting but thrilling, and I'm kind of scared at the same time. I want to do this. I really want to go down the slide, but I'm scared. Okay, so how do you get the child to make that jump? As I said, it needs to be done in a supportive and positive context in order for children to learn about uncertainty and cope with their physiological arousal and fear, because if they don't, it is not necessarily play. Well, it isn't play. Challenging and encouraging some type of risk outside the context of this safe, trusting, and warm relationship with that is not play. Okay? Particularly if it's ending in tears and they feel more fear and they do not feel supported and encouraged. So, adventurous play can have benefits, and this particular study found that, yes, indeed, the more children were engaged in outdoor play, adventurous play, this was all done during the COVID-19 epidemic, the less likely they were to have internalizing disorders, and the more likely they were to express positive affect and positive emotions. What can you do? Camping, inside, outside, who cares where it's at? Pitch a tent, make a tent, grill some hot dogs, but you eat dinner inside, out, or inside in your tent, and the child goes, well, wait, aren't we supposed to do this at the table? Well, not tonight, we're not, okay? Children love when parents, in particular dads, we refer to as destabilize their universe, okay? Wait a minute. That's not how things are supposed to be done. We're supposed to be eating at the table. Well, really? Not now. Why can't we do this, okay? Destabilizing the and providing the unexpected. Go for a walk in nature, of course. Talk about different animals. Talk about plants. Pick up leaves. Collect rocks, acorns. Do a nature scavenger hunt. I provided this from a website. Ask questions while you're on that walk. What sound does a squirrel make? I don't know. Me neither. But he climbs in trees, okay? Have a conversation. Point out facts to your child. Put in some nature sounds or other calming music when you get back home. Get out the watercolors. Get an old shirt. Put on a smock. Let them paint what they remember. Memory, building memory, okay? You can paint too. You may be messy. It probably is going to be messy if they're little, okay? But that's part of the fun. Just make sure, however, if you clean up afterwards so that somebody else doesn't have to do it. Go garden. Garden. Go outside. Dig in dirt. Okay? Give them a shovel. Plant a seed. Use a pot. Let your child sit there and wonder when that first little seedling sprouts. Okay? They can watch it grow. And they can then tend for it, if it's like a tomato plant. And then watch the growth of this plant. Eat the vegetables they grow. Yes, they're going to get dirty if they're playing in dirt and they're out and gardening, but you give them a bath. Read books about nature, okay? My son loved reading books about animals. We learned a lot. So, for instance, we didn't know until we read all these books that the deadliest snakes and insects all live in Australia, okay? The 6 deadliest snakes in the world, all in Australia. Funnel web spider lives in Australia. Some kind of ants live in Australia, okay? Australia seems to have all these insects. And again, I'm not saying that's the book you need to read, but read about nature, learn, and your child will probably more than likely love it. Play ball or other sports. Take them outside. Teach them the rules of sportsmanship, okay? You know, when you have teams, whether it's board games or being outside, there are rules, okay? Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And you have to learn at some point that you have to be a good loser. What does that look like? How do you scaffold that for your child? Shared book reading, storytelling, also something that parents do, fathers also do it. What does it do? It exposes children to words and language. It exposes children through these stories to unfamiliar or familiar cultures, practices, places, cultural values, an understanding of others. It promotes theory of mind and perspective taking. It provides a context for learning what we refer to as literacy concepts. So you need to learn how you read a book. It's not just the words on the page, but you need to learn that books open. They have to be held a certain way, not sideways, but the right way in terms of orientation. For English, Words are read from the left to the right page, to the right side of the page. They have to learn there's page turning involved. These are all sorts of concepts that can happen with word learning, with book reading. It also promotes positive interaction experiences because this book reading time is time well spent in building your relationship. I'm going to harp that home over and over and over, that all these activities ultimately are important because it's building the relationship between father and child, that emotional connection, and eventually a secure father-infant attachment. Dads, as I said, are more animated and more interactive when they do book reading. They're more likely to elaborate, provide more clarification when they do book reading. They ask more questions of their children when we're doing book reading, particularly what we call what questions. So, what's that? Cow. What sound does the cow make? Moo. Where do we find cows? In a barn. Okay, so on and so forth. A lot of what questions are being asked for more further clarification. And when you use these kinds of questions, research finds that these types of questions in this type of book reading context is linked to children's more advanced language, more vocabulary words, better comprehension, and their own ability to produce what questions. So if you've had a young child, they may very well have gone through what I call the why stage, which is, well, why does that happen? Why is that there? Because I put it there, your mom put it there. But why? Okay, well, because that's where you put the dog ball. But why? Okay, so they get very capable of answering that, and instead of thinking of it as perhaps an annoyance, think of it as advancement in language skills because they've learned how to master questions. Cognitive stimulation, what is it? It's any activity that is used to enhance children's attention and cognitive functioning. Reading, telling stories, singing songs. They expose children to language experiences, vocabulary, learning the structure of a story, that there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. It teaches children syntax in terms of grammar. This type of cognitive stimulating play or book reading and singing predicts early reading skills, and exposure to numbers such as counting and naming shapes predicts early math skills. Singing assists with infants' emotion regulation. So for instance, we know singing seems to decrease distress and crying in very young infants. It of course increases smiling and positive affect. It allows infants to stay in a longer state of what we call quiet attentive, and it seems to be able to support sleeping. What can you do? Take a trip to the library. Pick out books, stay for the read aloud story time, or pick out books, Dad, that you want to read, okay? Why not? You're Dad, you have an interest as well. Share those interests with your child, okay? Read bedtime stories, make animal sounds, act things out, animate, ask what questions. Who does that? Where does he do that? What sound does he make? Tell stories about your childhood. Children love this. Tell stories about when you were a child, where you grew up, the things you did, okay? Say, I remember this one time when your grandma, okay? And fill in the blank, whatever it is. Just be careful because if you tell them something that grandma doesn't want them to know, the next time they see grandma, they're going to tell grandma all about what's something that Daddy told them. Sing songs, nursery rhymes, whatever songs you like. The ABC song is very, very popular. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that the A, B, C, D, E, F, G is also the same tune for Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And children love these types of rhyming and these types of songs. Take your kids on the grocery store or dollar store scavenger hunt. Here's an example. You set things up. You tell them, okay, let's go find these things. Bananas. Where are the bananas? Let's go find bananas. How about the apples, oranges? How many bananas can we count? Okay, all these different activities are encouraging some type of skill or development. Make Rice Krispie treats, okay? It's easy. You can read the back of the box. Step by step by step, they learn. Organization, sequencing, okay? Measure out the Rice Krispies. How many cups do we need, okay? Count the marshmallows. Eat a couple of them too, okay? Let them stir to build that gross motor skills. Is there going to probably be a mess and Rice Krispies all over? Probably. But you clean up the kitchen, okay? Role play. You be the doctor. I'll be daddy. Play pretend. Have tea parties. Make the stuffed animals sing, dance, and talk. Puzzles. Build the blocks. You build one, then you let them build one. Can they make the same thing that you did? Scaffold them. But don't necessarily do it for them. Let them do it. Encourage them. Persevere. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. I don't know if anybody knows this. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Okay. Who said? Well, Simon says touch your nose. Okay. All of these are types of activities that allow your child to develop these skills. So my final words for dads are, dads, you are amazing. Okay, you're amazing to your children. Your kids think so too, okay? All these different activities, and I've only touched the tip of the iceberg here. There's so much more I could talk about. You can do, and any parent, any adult caregiver can do. And some of these things may seem frivolous and maybe even silly, making goofy faces, for instance. But it is these daily interactions, day in and day out, day in and day out, over and over and over and over, that you do with your children that is facilitating many, many different aspects of children's development. Okay, I'm not, this has been sort of like, oh, enjoy or whatever. It's not always going to be peaches and cream. Okay, parenting is hard work, okay? Your little ones are going to try your patience. They're going to test your limits. They're not going to always listen. When they get to be toddlers, they love the word no. Okay? And they're going to wear you out. Okay? But one of your main goals as dads is the same as with all parents. Do the best you can. Connect. Build your relationship with that child. Share affect, have fun, respond to them, teach them, love them, excite them, encourage them to explore and to figure things out in the world. You all in the end are their secure base and what we refer to as a safe haven from which to do these things according to attachment theory so they can venture out and learn about the world around them. So try to enjoy it. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any questions? All
Yes.
right, let me come around.
Hi, I was wondering if you could speak to how fathers can encourage second language development, particularly in a bilingual or multilingual home.
That's a really excellent question, and we need my colleague Yulia Kovelman here in terms of how you encourage second language. I'm not an expert on second language, but I would venture to guess it's sort of the same in terms of what you would do to encourage language development with any language, because the things that I talked about, that's not unique to English, okay? Exposure to language, reading books in the different languages, for instance. Talking to your children in in language. If you have two parents, one of them speaking one language and the other, both parents speaking those languages and exposing the child to those different languages, learning the grammar. That's what I would suggest. Fathers, there's no reason dads can't do that. That's not, anybody can, fathers, mothers, grandmas, whoever, multiple caregivers. So the more enriching that language environment is, and if dads are contributing to it, then by all means, then these children are going to, I'm assuming you mean second, early language, right? Like in the early years, not like trying to learn a second language when you're in college, right? You're talking about when a child's being exposed very early in life, perhaps to two caregivers or multiple caregivers or multiple languages. So I would say the same sort of scaffolding and strategies that we know encourage language development. Learning songs, learning singing songs in that language. All these things that encourage literacy.
Okay, any more questions? Oh.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brenda. That was a lot of fun. I was wondering if you could, we talked a bit about attachment, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what I'm sure like there's way more work in mom attachment than fathers, but I was wondering like, we know like the sensitive parenting relates to stronger attachment, better base in moms. I was wondering if you could like compare and contrast if it's similar in with fathers, or if there's some differences that lead to a secure attachment with the father.
Well, that first thing I was talking about with the paternal sensitivity, that was exactly what it was designed to do, was to sort of replicate what we knew about moms. Is does sensitive caregiving, like sensitive, does predict security of mother-child attachment. And yes, it does seem, although at a much more modest level, that when fathers do the same thing, that it also increases the likelihood of a secure father attachment. Unfortunately, because there's just not a lot of work on it, there is some theorizing that dads play. So in attachment theory, we have these dual concepts: safe haven and secure base. Safe haven is sort of like a balancing act. You have, when the child feels threatened in the world, like they're exploring, something happens, there's a dog comes by, they go running back to their safe haven, which is the parent. They go running back for the safe haven, they get their security, and then when they feel comfortable again, now they use that parent as the secure base to now go back out and explore. So there's two dimensions of attachment theory. One is attachment and getting that safe haven, but you have to be able to go out into the world and explore. You're not going to learn. So some people are suggesting that fathers may play more of a role for that secure base, encouraging exploration. They can serve that safe haven, but there seems to be some suggestion that children may go to moms over dads for that. But they very much go to dads for this exploratory, challenging, rough and tumble play. So it may very well be that ultimately that kind of activity may ultimately predict the security of an infant-father attachment or father attachment more than that sensitive kind of protective type of interactions we often see in terms of dealing with distress when a child's upset and they're unthreatened with moms. But we don't know. We don't know. What we do know is if you think about the security of attachment with, let's say, two parents, in this case, let's say it's a two-parent family with moms and dads, but this would also be the case with any family that has two parents. A child can develop a secure attachment with one, or a child can have an insecure attachment, okay? So a child, if there are two parents in that household, that child could have two secure attachments, two insecure attachments, one secure attachment with one parent and insecure with the other, and then the other way around, right? And what we know, of course, is if you have two secure attachments, so if you're securely attached in for instance, that's mother, father, family, to both mom and dad, your outcomes are better. You're more successful in terms of peer relationships, social competence, emotional regulation, fewer behavior problems. Of course, if you have two insecure, you're really at risk. Your accumulation, that you don't have any of that support from either parent. And then if you have one secure and one insecure, you're sort of like in the middle, so you have a little bit of scaffolding and support, but certainly not as much as if you had both of those relationships with multiple caregivers secure. That's not the same question, but that's kind of the way things are going right now in terms of exactly, acknowledging that children have multiple caregivers. Multiple caregivers.
Any more questions?
This is just
This is just a brief observation. I'm no expert in this, but I think there's a middle ground which may complicate things, and that's an ambivalent attachment. You could have a secure attachment, insecure attachment, and there are a lot of kids who have ambivalent attachments.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. I could do an entire lecture just on attachment, so I didn't get into that. But yeah, there are multiple types of insecure attachment, avoidant attachments where children sort of avoid and snub the parent. Ambivalent, which is I kind of love you, but I kind of don't too, and so I'm kind of ambivalent. So when I'm in a strange situation, for instance, I want you, but then I want to push back from you. And then we also have disorganized, right, which don't seem to have any real pattern. They're just very disoriented and disorganized, and they aren't really able to use the caregiver for much in terms of any of the outcomes we've talked about today. So though you're absolutely right, fortunately, 65 to 75% of kids develop secure attachments, and very few, the other remaining, 25 to 30% have insecure attachment across that range. Okay, so when we look at analyses, we collapse all of those insecure attachments and compare them to secure attachments. But you are absolutely 100% correct. An ambivalent or resistant attachment is very different than an avoidant attachment, and we know that what leads to those in terms of is different. The different types of parenting behaviors predict those different types of attachments. So that's an excellent question, and it does make things a lot more complicated. But unfortunately, we often don't have large enough samples to pull it apart down to that level to look to see what happens if you have a secure attachment and an insecure ambivalent. Okay, we just don't have that.
Thank you.
Also, if you don't know this, secured attachments, there's actually 4 of those too. So, yeah, but as I said, I could do an entire lecture just on that, but I thank you for that because that's a very important question.
I think we should have you back for a lecture on secure attachment.
Thank you. You spoke about children liking sort of a destabilized environment, I think you called it. But then you also spoke about teaching them about rules and that sort of thing. I feel like there's a bit of tension between the two. Could you speak more about that?
Okay, so destabilizing, what I'm trying to get across there is that the notion that in play, okay, that there may be sort of routines that you go through. I think of when I was doing my graduate work and doing home observations, I have this, I will always remember this dad. There was like a cook set that we would bring in and give them. And what are you supposed to do with a cook set? You're supposed to put the hamburger in the pan, you're supposed to cook it, you're supposed to take the spoon and you're supposed to stir it. There's a set role-playing situation here as to how this is supposed to do. And the dad was kind of getting a little bored and he just took the frying pan and put it on his head. Said, look, I got a hat, okay? And the kid's like, what? That's not what you're supposed to do, Daddy, with a frying pan. He said, well, why not? And what this does is it's basically, it's forcing the child to think about alternative ways and more sophisticated and complex ways. Yes, a real frying pan you would never put on your head, right? But with a play frying pan, it can contribute to this playfulness and opening up the child to alternative ways of thinking. When I talked about the rules, I was talking about more in the nature of formal games and sports. Okay, so I don't know if that's what you were trying to refer to. I meant like, there's certain, you don't cheat. Okay, putting a frying pan on your head is not about cheating. It's just being about silliness. And doing things differently. But there are rules, okay? Game rules, like you don't cheat. You don't steal the pieces and stick them in your pocket, okay? You don't take more money from Monopoly. I mean, there are rules that you have to learn. And in sports, it's the same way. You play soccer, not both teams don't get to win. One team is going to lose. I don't know about anybody who's ever had a young child who doesn't like to lose. Game pieces come flying across the room. Okay, they throw a temper tantrum in the middle of the soccer field because they lost. Okay, that's what I meant with respect to teaching rules of sportsmanship and games. Because guess what? There are rules in our lives. We don't get to do, like, there's a speed limit. Okay? We're supposed to abide by it. If we don't, maybe we get caught, maybe we don't. But it's a rule. Okay? And teaching them early on that there's certain contexts where you have to have rules. And then there's other times you can just be fun and play. I hope that helps clarify.
Any more questions?
Thank you very much. This dichotomous roles for the moms and dads, as far as I understand, that was based on the sex of the parents, male fathers and female mothers. What about the same-sex families?
Beautiful question. Beautiful question. I'm doing a talk tonight on fathers, and so because most of these men are married to women, and we have most of our research is on that, but it is not about the gender necessarily. We have gender norms. So when you have families with mother-fathers in the same family, you do have to deal with gender norms in terms of men have been socialized this way and women have been socialized this way. The beauty of same-sex relationships and same-sex families is that there isn't that confusion, I guess is what I'm going to say. Is like they're the same sex. So what happens there is essentially they're a beautiful test to basically see how much of what we know about mothers and fathers in these heterosexual families is due to gender norms and gender, or is it due to socialization? Because you can remove that. We know that parents who are in same-sex families parent very similarly. Very, very similarly. When they look at families and children across these different family forms, there's no difference. Okay? Sometimes there may be, but it's due to the fact that there may be stressors in some of these families, and it's the stress that's responsible perhaps for affecting the parenting and the child outcomes, not necessarily the family configuration or the family structure. But if you think we don't have a lot of research on dads, I would love to do a study on gay fathers. Absolutely love. We are so desperately in need in these types of studies.